My name's Joshua Kauffman, and I live in Washington, D.C., over here in the United States. I'm a professional trumpet player. I live sort of a dual life. I work in one of our U.S. military premier bands. I'm in the U.S. Army band Pershing Zone, which is located here in our nation's capital. And I also play on the outside. I'm sort of a studio musician, freelancer. I do all kinds of stuff. I play with the National Symphony Orchestra, the Kennedy Center Opera House. I work in New York City. And do sort of all kinds of freelancing, commercial music, jazz music, classical, whatever. I'll play any music, and if it's good music, that's a good bonus. I'm also a Yamaha performing artist. I am sort of done some product development with them on some of their instruments, various cornets and flugelhorns and trumpets and stuff like that. And I work for GR Mouthpieces. Lots of trumpet.
Could you describe what life was, or work was, both, I guess, before, COVID hit?
Over the course of an entire year, the Army Band conducts between 6,000 and 7,000 different jobs and concerts, which is a huge number. If you think there's only 365 days in a year, you're like, how could you possibly get all of that done? The pace at my job was really quick. I play lead trumpet for the big band, and so we do a lot of obviously big band concerts. Like if the concert band would need to do like maybe West Side Story or The Incredibles, something more commercial, I may go over and play the lead trumpet part. Or I put together a Louis Armstrong like Hot 5, Hot 7 group. So all kinds of things going on over there. And then concurrently, like I said, I do a lot of stuff on the outside. I'm playing with major orchestras. I'm doing TV and like commercial recording sessions and stuff like that. And I do work on the equipment side of the trumpet quite a bit. I work with Yamaha pretty closely and Gary Radke at GR Mouthpieces. Before the pandemic, life was sort of always in like this tailspin in a positive way. I'd always wake up and be like, oh shoot, I have to do this today. And then tomorrow would be something totally different. But that's kind of the fun thing of being a freelancer is you wake up and life is different for you every single day. And so you never get bored. But I was pretty much playing 6-7 days a week prior to the pandemic. And obviously when March of 2020 came, that came to a screeching halt.
It's crazy that you guys, just occupied 24/7 basically with music.
Yeah, there's a lot of things going on here in the States, and in every city too. It's kind of wild how much work there is for everybody.
When COVID struck, what was the immediate effect to your work? Or to you overall?
As far as like my home life, my wife and I were very grateful that didn't change. I got paid the whole way through the pandemic. I lost financially on all of my civilian work, what I do as a freelancer. But the military jobs in the U.S. are very highly sought after jobs, and they pay very well. They have great benefits. Musically, however, that was very different for me. I went from playing gigs 6-7 days a week to nothing, and I was kind of losing my mind. It's I don't want to sound like all mushy, but like music moves you in a certain way. That's why we play music. It makes people feel good, or we use it to comfort one another. Like when you have a loss of a family member or something, or you play music when you're excited. One of the major impacts for me though was that the only thing I could do was kind of what we're doing here was meeting people via Zoom. And it was around the time I started getting a lot more active on social media, and just like, well, if we can't meet in person, let's meet over the phone or the internet or Zoom or whatever, or just something where like you and I would just get together because we had nothing to do that day and just sit and play or share ideas about the trumpet, meeting people around the world, not just within my circle here in the US. I discovered I really love teaching. And then through the teaching in my free time, I was actually able to help myself a lot as a trumpet player. When you're a professional musician and you're working all the time, you kind of can't change what works. I'm very hesitant to change my equipment because I'm working so much. Like, I don't know, like, what if I take a new horn out tonight? Like, what if I just mess up on the gig? I felt like I was kind of reborn in a sense, like, okay, I can be a beginner all over again. But now with the knowledge of a professional player, I was able to undo a lot of bad habits I've developed over the years, or like little problems with my embouchure that I was always afraid to address because I said, well, this is going to take like a week to adjust. I can't take a week off of gigs. But now, during the pandemic, I was able to do that. I feel like I came out of the pandemic when the work started to come back. I came back a way better trumpet player than I did going into the pandemic, just because I was able to address myself for once.
Did you see an increase, or even experience an increase of like remote recordings?
Oh yeah, for sure. I didn't do anything I didn't do anything like that prior to the pandemic.
Yeah.
I'm like the last generation that grew up like without a cell phone, without a computer. Like that stuff was coming out like when I was in high school. And a lot of my friends wanted to do projects. They were like, hey, do you do home recording? I'm like, yeah. And then I was like scrambling to figure this out. How can I do all this stuff? Because I have no clue what I'm doing. And so I was able to learn a lot about the sort of production and recording side of actually recording a trumpet. I did a lot of those like little cube videos you see on YouTube, and I did tons of interviews.
What do you think the music scene will be like in the near future? I don't know, like 4 or 5 years?
Now that we're sort of like, the US is like in full force. I mean, I'm actually working now more than I did even pre-COVID. It's kind of getting to the point of almost being ridiculous. I will say that there's been a ton of work. I have been working constantly with so many different things. I just did a concert and recorded an album actually with William Shatner, who is Captain Kirk on Star Trek, if you know who that is. Yeah. And just did a record with the National Symphony, and like that concert was incredible. It just seems like in general, at least here, people are so hungry and so needy as far as like they want to hear live music. They want those sort of like art-centered events that I think that if anything, again, just to be positive and optimistic, I think the pandemic proved that, in a sense, musicians and artists in general are essential workers, right? Because, I mean, at first we weren't, right? We were like the first people to lose our jobs. Yeah. And we were like some of the last people to get our jobs back. But now that they're back, I think that people realize, like, could you imagine if we were in the pandemic and there was no TV or film, there was no music, there was no painting, there was, take away all the arts. What would people have done? Film and TV, that's art too. What if there was no TV during the pandemic? Or books, no reading material, nothing. And so while we were, in a sense, some of us probably felt expendable, like, geez, like, we can't play. And people were starting to go back to work, but they didn't want to open up the symphony halls, or they didn't want to open any of that stuff up yet, or they were worried about, whatever. I had to put a mask on my horn or whatever the heck. Yeah. Bell covers, stuff like that. Yeah, or we play these things with like a flap, mouthpiece, whatever. I have seen personally, at least, sort of a newly found appreciation for the arts. Sometimes I've played gigs and I just wonder, like, man, is the audience even alive? But now most of the gigs I play, the audience, like, you can tell in their applause and in their candor and everything, they are very they're very excited to be there. Maybe it stays. I hope it does. I hope it stays. Maybe it'll go back to just kind of like just normal. You just kind of do your thing. But so far, I have been very excited to see how the public has reacted to actually being able to see a concert again. So I think it'll stay. But by the flip side of that coin, I think maybe I just don't know. That's a really good question. I don't know what the future looks like. We have definitely proven, though, that we can do things more isolated now, and I don't know if that's a good thing.
Yeah, I mean, I'm basically asking you to predict the future, and things change.
I was talking to somebody about this morning, actually, another trumpet player in town. We went and grabbed some coffee, and then he brought a really good point. I said, man, the worst thing the pandemic proved to us was that we could do our work from home, right? Like, right. Yeah. Now, and I've seen this, and you can almost use it to your benefit. Like, if my friend, let's say, lives across the United States, but he really likes the way I play lead trumpet, he doesn't have to use anybody in his town anymore. He could record whatever he wants up there and then send it to me and say, hey, man, would you mind laying the first trumpet part down? Well, sure. Now, in a sense, like, of course, I'm happy to do that, but part of what makes music so great is like the interaction we have face to face in a room playing together, shoulder to shoulder with people. My fear with the pandemic was that it proved that we could all do everything from home, but to me, that's not where the music is made. It's in the interaction between individuals in person. And what my friend said today is, he goes, man, it really feels like a renaissance, meaning that for so long, people went without live music and they went without the interaction. And you've probably done it yourself. You're at a gig and the crowd is real fired up and you feed off of them and they feed off of you and you play better solos. And, like in a jazz club, you get this great environment. You can't replicate that sitting at home watching Lincoln Center and Wynton Marsalis on TV. It's just an exhilarating experience to see them in person. It's that much better